The old maple floors of Sullivan's bar creaked under Victor Harrington's polished leather shoes as he walked in. A rush of memories hit him. This place hadn't changed in the 15 years since he'd left this small town. The same worn bar stools, the faded photographs of local sports teams on the walls and in the corner, the upright piano his fingers had first found their purpose on. "Well, look who the wind blew in," called Patty, the owner, her face lighting up with recognition. "Our very own piano man." Victor smiled, accepting the small ripple of attention that spread through the room. At 36, he had grown accustomed to being recognized, though usually in grand concert halls across Europe, not in his dusty hometown where he'd started playing at age 5. "Just passing through," he said, sliding onto a bar stool. "Thought I'd see if this place still makes a decent old-fashioned." Patty laughed. "For you? I'll make it indecent." She started mixing his drink with practiced hands. "Read about your show in New York last month. The newspaper said you brought the audience to tears." Victor nodded, not bothering to mention it had been the London Philharmonic, not New York. Small-town papers always got details wrong. "It was a good night," he said simply, eyes drifting to the piano. "That old thing still work?" "Barely in tune, but the Friday night crowd doesn't seem to mind." As if on cue, a young man in his 20s sat down at the piano and began a clumsy rendition of Piano Man. Victor winced at the missed notes but kept his expression neutral. He was home for just 2 nights before his charity concert at the town hall tomorrow evening. A favor to his mother, who still lived here and chaired the local arts council. He wasn't looking to make waves. 3 drinks later, Victor found himself more relaxed than he'd been in months. The pressure of his upcoming Asian tour melted away as old acquaintances stopped by to chat. Some congratulated him on his success, others reminisced about high school days. Victor was just considering trying the piano himself when the door opened, bringing in a cool evening breeze and a small group of women. They weren't particularly remarkable. Local women in their 30s, dressed casually for a night out. But Victor's attention caught on one of them. She wasn't the most striking of the group, with her simple blue dress and light brown hair pulled back in a loose bun. Something about the way she carried herself, though, a quietness that seemed to observe everything without needing to comment. "Who's that?" Victor asked Patty, nodding toward the woman as she and her friends found a table near the piano. "Eleanor Chen? She runs the bookstore over on Maple. Nice lady, keeps to herself mostly." Victor watched as the group ordered drinks. Eleanor didn't join in their louder laughter, but her smile seemed genuine when she did offer it. The amateur pianist finally finished his Billy Joel marathon to scattered applause, and a call went up for other players. "No one here can touch Victor Harrington," someone called out, and Victor felt eyes turn his way. He shook his head with practiced modesty. "I'm just here for a drink, folks." But the calls continued until he stood, straightening his jacket with a small sigh that suggested reluctance while secretly welcoming the chance to show off a little. He sat at the bench, ran his fingers lightly over the keys, then launched into Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu. Despite the piano's flaws, Victor's skill transformed the instrument. His fingers flew across the keys, drawing out emotions that silenced the bar completely. When he finished, the place erupted in applause. Victor accepted it with a nod, glancing over at Eleanor's table. While her friends were clapping enthusiastically, she watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Another local took a turn next, playing a simple country song, followed by an elderly man who performed a halting version of Moonlight Sonata. The piano became the center of the evening's entertainment, with varying levels of skill on display. Victor ordered another drink, enjoying the role of honored guest and occasional commentator. "You should try it, Elle," he overheard one of the women saying to Eleanor. "You used to play all the time." Eleanor shook her head. "I just mess around sometimes." "Nothing worth hearing." "Better than half these folks," her friend insisted. Victor, feeling the pleasant buzz of good whiskey and admiration, made his way over to their table. "I couldn't help overhearing," he said, turning on the charm that had worked so well at post-concert receptions. "Another pianist in our midst?" Eleanor looked up, seeming almost startled to be addressed directly. "Oh no, not really. I just enjoy playing sometimes." Something about her dismissive tone irritated Victor. Was she being modest, or did she think playing the piano was just some casual hobby anyone could claim? "Everyone enjoys playing," he said, his smile staying fixed. "But there's a difference between enjoying it and being good at it." A slight tension fell over the table. One of Eleanor's friends gave a nervous laugh. Well, Elle's pretty good, actually. She teaches piano to some of the kids in town. Is that so? Victor looked at Eleanor with fresh interest, noting her slightly uncomfortable expression. What do you teach them? Chopsticks? Heart and soul? Eleanor met his gaze directly for the first time. I teach them to love music first. Technique comes later. A diplomatic answer, Victor said, leaning against their table. But technique and passion have to go hand in hand, don't they? Otherwise, it's just noise with feeling. The bar had quieted somewhat, people at nearby tables now listening to their conversation. Victor was vaguely aware he might be coming across as arrogant, but something about this woman's quiet confidence challenged him. Music is personal, Eleanor replied, her voice soft, but not backing down. Not everyone plays to be heard by others, Victor laughed. Then why play at all? Music is communication. If you're any good, you should want people to hear it. One of Eleanor's friends shifted uncomfortably. Ella plays beautifully. She's just modest. Then she should show us, Victor said, suddenly inspired by what seemed like a wonderful idea. He turned to address the wider bar. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a proposition. The room focused on him exactly as it did when he took concert stages. Victor was in his element now. Tomorrow night, as some of you know, I'm performing a charity concert at the town hall. Pretty standard program. All proceeds to the local arts education fund. He turned back to Eleanor, who was watching him with growing wariness. I think we should add something special. A piano duel. Murmurs rippled through the bar. Eleanor's face flushed slightly. Ms. Chen here is apparently something of a hidden talent, Victor continued. What do you say, Eleanor? You and me, one piece each. Let the audience decide who communicates better through music. It'll certainly sell more tickets for the charity. That's not necessary, Eleanor said, her voice firmer now. I'm not a performer. Afraid to be compared to a professional? Victor knew he was pushing too hard, but couldn't seem to stop himself. The whiskey, the admiration from the crowd, and something about Eleanor's quiet self-assurance had created a perfect storm of his worst impulses. Victor, Patty called from behind the bar. Leave the poor woman alone. But the crowd was warming to the idea, seeing it as exciting entertainment. Come on, Elle. Do it for the Arts Fund. Show 'em what you've got. Eleanor looked around at the eager faces, then back at Victor. Something shifted in her expression, a resignation mixed with something he couldn't identify. One piece, she said quietly, but I choose when I play. Victor grinned triumphantly. Wonderful. A true challenge. Tomorrow night, the mysterious bookstore owner versus the concert pianist. He raised his glass to her in a toast. May the best musician win. As he returned to the bar amid excited chatter, Victor caught sight of Eleanor's face. She wasn't looking at him anymore, but staring at her hands on the table with an expression that, for just a moment, made him wonder if he'd made a mistake. But the thought passed quickly. After all, what could this simple woman possibly play that would match his 15 years of international acclaim? Tomorrow would be entertaining, if nothing else. A charming story to tell at his next society dinner. He had no idea that in less than 24 hours, everything he thought he knew about music, success, and Eleanor Chen would be turned upside down. Word traveled fast in small towns. By the time Victor woke up the next morning in his mother's guest room, his phone was buzzing with messages. Local reporters wanted comments about the piano showdown, and his mother had already fielded 3 calls from excited neighbors. What exactly did you do last night? His mother asked, setting a cup of coffee in front of him at the kitchen table. Despite being in her 70s, Martha Harrington still moved with purpose, her gray hair neatly styled even at this early hour. Victor rubbed his temples, regretting that 4th whiskey. Just drummed up some publicity for your charity concert, Mom. You're welcome. Martha's expression remained skeptical. Patty Sullivan called. Said you put Eleanor Chen on the spot. Who? Victor took a sip of coffee, the previous night's events still foggy. The bookstore owner, the woman you challenged to a piano duel. Martha sat across from him, her eyes sharp. Victor, that girl has been through enough without you turning her into a circus act. Victor frowned. It was just a bit of fun. Besides, she agreed to it. After you cornered her in front of the whole bar, Martha said flatly. That's not like you, Victor. But wasn't it? Victor stared into his coffee. The truth was, it was exactly like him, at least the him he'd become. The rising star who expected deference, who had grown used to being the most talented person in any room. Success had changed him in ways he hadn't fully recognized until seeing himself through his mother's disappointed eyes. "It'll sell more tickets," he said defensively. "Good for your arts fund," Martha sighed. "Just be kind today. That's all I ask." After breakfast, Victor walked downtown to check out the concert venue. The small town hall had been transformed with extra chairs and a rented grand piano on the modest stage. A handwritten sign at the entrance now boasted, "Special event, local piano duel featuring international concert pianist Victor Harrington." No mention of Eleanor Chen. Typical. Inside, the town's events coordinator, a bustling woman named Diane, was directing volunteers. Her face lit up when she saw Victor. "There he is. Our star attraction." She hurried over. "We've sold 30 more tickets since last night. The phone's been ringing off the hook." Victor nodded, pleased despite himself. "Glad to hear it. Will you need anything special for the duel? We only have the one piano." "That's fine. We'll play one after the other." Victor ran his hand over the piano's surface. It was a decent instrument, not concert hall quality, but respectable. "Has Ms. Chen been into practice?" Diane shook her head. "Haven't heard from her, but I did call to confirm she's still participating." She lowered her voice. Between us, she sounded reluctant. Almost called it off. Something uncomfortable shifted in Victor's stomach. "But she's still doing it?" "Yes, said she'd honor her commitment." Diane glanced at her clipboard. "Now, about your requirements." Victor spent the next hour discussing the program, lighting, and sound setup. Afterward, he decided to walk around town, partly to clear his head, and partly because he found himself curious about Eleanor Chen. The bookstore wasn't hard to find. Chen's Books occupied a corner storefront on Maple Street, its windows displaying colorful arrangements of new releases and classics. A bell jingled as Victor pushed open the door. The shop was cozy and well-organized, with wooden shelves reaching to the ceiling and comfortable chairs tucked into corners. A few customers browsed quietly. At the counter stood a young man with glasses, helping an elderly customer find a specific title. Victor wandered through the stacks, running his fingers along book spines. He hadn't been in a proper bookstore in ages. Everything came to his apartment by delivery these days. There was something soothing about the smell of paper and binding glue. "Can I help you find something?" He turned to find one of Eleanor's friends from the bar last night, the one who had encouraged her to play. Up close, he could see she had the same eyes as Eleanor, though her manner was more outgoing. "Just browsing," Victor said. Then, "You're Eleanor's friend?" "Sister," she corrected. "Grace Chen. And you're the pianist who backed my sister into a corner last night." Despite her words, her tone wasn't hostile, more resigned. Victor had the grace to look uncomfortable. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Grace studied him. "Elle doesn't perform anymore. Hasn't for years. She teaches, though, right? That's different. That's about the kids, not her." Grace shelved a book that had been left on a nearby table. "Look, I'm sure you didn't mean any harm, but my sister's private about her music. Has been since..." She trailed off, and Victor found himself unexpectedly curious. "Since what?" Grace seemed to debate whether to continue. "It's not my story to tell, just go easy on her tonight, okay? This isn't a real competition for her. She's only doing it because the whole town would talk if she backed out." Before Victor could respond, the bell jingled again. Eleanor herself walked in carrying a stack of mail. She stopped when she saw Victor, surprise crossing her face. "Hello," she said simply. Up close and in daylight, Victor noticed things he hadn't the night before. The slight crease between her eyebrows. The way she held herself with a kind of careful composure, as if used to keeping emotions in check. "I was just checking out your store," he said, suddenly feeling awkward. "It's nice. Thank you." She moved behind the counter, sorting through the mail. Her movements were efficient, practiced. Victor cleared his throat. "About tonight, I'll be there," she said, not looking up. "One piece, as agreed." "Right, good." He paused. "Have you decided what you'll play?" Now she did look at him, her expression unreadable. "Does it matter? You've already decided how it will turn out." The quiet certainty in her voice unsettled him, not because she seemed intimidated, but because she didn't at all. "Well, I just wanted to say, What did he want to say? That he was sorry? That didn't feel quite right. I look forward to hearing you play. Eleanor nodded once, then turned to help a customer who had approached the counter. Victor, recognizing the dismissal, headed for the door. As he left, he heard Grace call after him. 7 o'clock sharp, Mr. Harrington. Elle doesn't like to be kept waiting. The rest of the day passed quickly. Victor returned to his mother's house to practice, though he hardly needed to. He'd selected Liszt's La Campanella, a piece famous for its technical difficulty, rapid hand-crossing, wide jumps, and complex fingering. It had always impressed audiences, and tonight would be no different. By 6:30, the town hall was filling up. Victor peeked through the curtains, surprised to see almost every seat taken. His mother's arts events usually drew a decent crowd, but nothing like this. People were clearly here for the showdown. Backstage, Diane fluttered around, making last-minute arrangements. "We've added your duel to the end of the program," she explained. "You'll perform your regular pieces first, then we'll announce the special event." Victor nodded, adjusting his cufflinks. "Has Miss Chen arrived?" "Not yet," Diane checked her watch. "But we've got time." At 6:50, with only 10 minutes until showtime, Eleanor still hadn't appeared. Victor found himself strangely anxious. What if she didn't show? The crowd would be disappointed, but worse, he'd never know if she could actually play. Just as Diane was beginning to panic, the backstage door opened. Eleanor walked in, wearing the same simple blue dress from the night before. No fancy concert attire, no sheet music in hand. She nodded politely to the stage hands, then took a seat in the corner, hands folded in her lap. Victor approached her, suddenly feeling overdressed in his tailored suit. "You made it." "I said I would." Eleanor's voice was calm, but he noticed her fingers moving slightly against each other, as if playing invisible keys. "Nervous?" he asked, unable to help himself. Eleanor looked up at him, and for the first time a small smile touched her lips. "Are you?" Before he could answer, Diane called for places. The first half of the concert would begin. "Good luck," Eleanor said softly, her eyes meeting his. In that moment, with an intuition he couldn't explain, Victor realized he might need it more than he'd thought. The first half of the concert went flawlessly. Victor played pieces he could perform in his sleep. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, Debussy's Clair de Lune, and a few crowd-pleasing modern compositions. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause after each piece, and Victor felt himself settling into the familiar rhythm of performance. But throughout his playing, he found his eyes drifting to the side of the stage where Eleanor sat watching. Her face remained thoughtful, giving away nothing. Was she impressed? Intimidated? Bored? He couldn't tell, and it bothered him more than it should have. During intermission, Victor retreated backstage for a glass of water. His mother found him there, patting his arm with pride. "Wonderful as always, dear," she said. "The crowd loves you." "Thanks, Mom." Victor took a sip of water, his eyes scanning the room for Eleanor. She had disappeared. Martha followed his gaze. "Looking for someone?" "Just wondering where Ms. Chen went." His mother's expression softened. "She stepped outside for some air, said she needed a moment of quiet." She hesitated, then added, "You know, it's not too late to turn this into a friendly duet instead of a competition. It would be just as entertaining for the audience." Victor frowned. "She agreed to the duel because you put her on the spot." Martha shook her head. "You've changed, Victor. The boy I raised would never have used his talent to make someone else feel small." The words stung, partly because they contained a grain of truth. Success had come with a cost. Somewhere along the way, music had become less about joy and more about proving his superiority. "I'm not trying to make her feel small," he insisted. "I'm just what?" Victor didn't have an answer. Just showing off? Just assuming a small-town bookstore owner couldn't possibly compare to his professional training? Just entertaining himself at someone else's expense? None of those answers made him feel good about himself. The stage manager called 5 minutes to the second half. Victor straightened his jacket and tried to push away his mother's words. He had a job to do. Entertain this audience and raise money for the arts fund. Everything else was a distraction. As he moved toward the stage, he nearly collided with someone coming through the side door. Eleanor, her cheeks slightly flushed from the cool evening air. She stepped back quickly. "Sorry," she murmured. "No problem." Victor noticed she was breathing a bit rapidly, as if she'd been running, or as if she were nervous. Everything okay? Eleanor nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Just needed some space. An unexpected impulse to reassure her rose in Victor. Look, about this duel thing. We don't have to make it a competition. We could just each play a piece, no winner or loser. She studied him with those quiet eyes. Why the change of heart? Victor shrugged, uncomfortable under her gaze. Just seems unnecessary now. Now that you've had time to reconsider, Eleanor said, not unkindly. But the whole town is expecting a showdown. It would be disappointing to change the rules at the last minute. She smoothed her dress. Besides, I've made my peace with it. Before Victor could respond, the stage manager was ushering him back on stage. The second half began with more classical pieces, but Victor found his concentration slipping. What did Eleanor mean? She'd made her peace with it, as if she were facing an execution rather than a friendly musical competition. After his final solo piece, Diane stepped onto the stage with a microphone, her face beaming with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat for you tonight," she announced. "Our very own hometown hero, Victor Harrington, has issued a challenge, a piano duel between himself and a local talent, Eleanor Chen." The crowd erupted in applause and excited murmurs. Victor noticed several people turning to look at an older man sitting in the front row, a thin, stern-looking fellow who was frowning deeply. "Each pianist will perform one piece," Diane continued, "and you, our wonderful audience, will decide the winner through your applause. First up, our internationally acclaimed concert pianist Victor Harrington." More applause as Victor returned to the piano bench. He settled his fingers over the keys, took a breath, and launched into Liszt's La Campanella. The piece was specifically chosen to showcase technical virtuosity. His fingers flew across the keyboard, executing the rapid jumps and trills that made this piece famous for its difficulty. He'd performed it hundreds of times, but tonight he pushed himself further, adding extra flourishes, emphasizing the most challenging sections. "Look what I can do," his playing said. Years of training, of sacrifice, of dedication, all displayed in these impossible finger movements. The audience watched, mesmerized. When he finished with a dramatic final chord, they leapt to their feet, applauding wildly. Victor stood, bowed, and caught sight of Eleanor waiting at the edge of the stage. Her face was calm, but he noticed her hands were trembling slightly. Guilt stirred in his chest. He'd chosen the piece specifically to intimidate her, to show off his professional training. It was the musical equivalent of bringing a gun to a knife fight, and suddenly he felt ashamed. As they passed each other, him leaving the stage, her entering, he murmured, "Good luck." Eleanor paused, looked at him directly, and said quietly, "It's not about luck, Mr. Harrington." Diane introduced Eleanor with considerably less fanfare. "And now the owner of Chen's books, Eleanor Chen." The applause was polite but muted compared to Victor's reception. Eleanor took her seat at the piano, adjusting the bench slightly. Unlike Victor, she didn't immediately place her hands on the keys. Instead, she sat perfectly still for a long moment, her eyes closed. The audience grew quiet, waiting. Even Victor found himself holding his breath. When Eleanor finally placed her hands on the piano, the touch was gentle, almost reverent. Then she began to play. Victor recognized the piece instantly, Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. One of the most emotionally complex pieces in the piano repertoire, requiring not just technical skill but profound expressiveness. A bold choice. Within the first few measures, Victor felt something shift in the room. Eleanor's playing was quite different. Where his performance had been about showcasing difficulty, hers was about conveying emotion. Her fingers moved with precision, yes, but also with a sensitivity that made each note feel alive. As the piece progressed from its gentle opening to its thunderous middle section, Victor watched in growing astonishment. Eleanor's technique was flawless, not just good for an amateur, but genuinely masterful. Her body swayed slightly with the music, her face transformed by complete absorption in the piece. And then it hit him, the reason for her reluctance. The strange words from her sister, the older man in the front row who was now leaning forward, his stern face softening in recognition. Victor hurried to the wings where Diane stood watching, mouth slightly open in surprise. "Who is she?" he whispered urgently. "Really?" Diane glanced at him, then back at Eleanor. "You don't know? I thought that's why you challenged her." She shook her head. Eleanor Chen was Eleanor Chang 15 years ago. Child prodigy, Full scholarship to Juilliard. Victor felt the blood drain from his face. What happened? Parents got sick. Both of them, one after the other. Cancer. She came home to care for them, took over the family bookstore. Gave up everything. Diane's eyes remained fixed on Eleanor, her father there in the front row. He was against her playing from the start. Wanted her to focus on academics. When she came back to care for them, he made her promise to give up music completely. Said it distracted her from her responsibilities. On stage, Eleanor reached the most passionate section of the ballade, her fingers drawing out sounds from the piano that Victor had rarely heard matched, even in world-class concert halls. But she obviously still plays, Victor said. Diane nodded. In secret, mostly. Teaches kids at the community center after hours. I've heard she plays when the bookstore is closed very quietly, but she hasn't performed in public since she left Juilliard. Victor watched Eleanor, seeing her now with completely different eyes. Not a simple small-town bookstore owner who dabbled in piano, but a true artist who had sacrificed her gift for family duty. Someone who had continued to nurture her talent in private, without acclaim or recognition. As Eleanor approached the piece's famously difficult coda, Victor found himself holding his breath again. The fast, technically demanding conclusion would challenge any professional pianist. But Eleanor's fingers moved with absolute clarity and control, building to the final, powerful chords. When the last note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the hall erupted. The applause was deafening. People rose to their feet, some wiping tears from their eyes, others shouting bravo. Eleanor sat still at the piano for a moment, as if waking from a dream, before standing to offer a small, humble bow. Victor watched from the wings, his heart pounding. He had never heard the ballad played with such emotional depth. Eleanor's technical skill was impressive, yes, but it was the soul behind her playing that had left the audience spellbound, and him shaken to his core. As Eleanor walked off stage, her eyes met Victor's. There was no triumph in her expression, no smugness or satisfaction at having clearly outplayed him, just a quiet acknowledgement passing between two artists. That was... Victor struggled to find words adequate to what he'd just witnessed. Eleanor brushed a strand of hair from her face. It's been a while since I played for an audience. You could have fooled me, he said, shaking his head in wonder. Before they could say more, Diane bounded onto the stage with her microphone. Well, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that something? I think we're all a bit stunned by what we just heard. The audience cheered in agreement. Now it's time to choose our winner. First, let's hear it for Victor Harrington. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. Victor winced, knowing what was coming. And now for Eleanor Chen. The hall erupted again, this time with even louder applause, whistles, and cheers. There was no question who had won the hearts of the audience. I think we have our winner, Diane announced, gesturing toward the wings. Eleanor Chen, please come back out. Eleanor hesitated, looking uncomfortable with the attention. Victor made a split-second decision. Go on, he said, gently nudging her forward. They're waiting for you. As Eleanor reluctantly returned to the stage, Victor slipped away, needing a moment alone. He found a quiet corner backstage and sat heavily on a equipment trunk, his mind racing. He'd been so arrogant, so certain of his superiority. He treated Eleanor as if she were beneath him, never bothering to learn who she really was. And yet she had played with a depth of feeling that made his own performance seem like empty technical exercises. When had he lost that connection to the emotional heart of music? When had playing become about impressing rather than expressing? A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Victor? He looked up to find his mother standing there, her eyes gentle with understanding. Hey, Mom. Martha sat beside him on the trunk. She's remarkable, isn't she? Why didn't you tell me who she was? Victor asked. You knew, didn't you? His mother nodded. Everyone in town knows Eleanor's story. But would it have made a difference if I'd told you? Or would you have just seen it as more reason to show off? The question stung because it was fair. Yesterday's Victor would have viewed Eleanor's background as a challenge to his ego, not as the tragedy it truly was. I made a fool of myself, he admitted. No, Martha said firmly. You made a mistake. What matters is what you do now. Outside, they could hear Diane thanking the audience, announcing the total raised for the Arts Fund, a record amount. The event had been a success, largely due to the duel that Victor had initiated for all the wrong reasons. I need to apologize to her, he said. Martha squeezed his hand. That's my boy. When Victor returned to the main backstage area, a small crowd had gathered around Eleanor. Friends, neighbors, audience members who had found their way behind the scenes. She was accepting their compliments with gracious embarrassment, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. On the edge of the group stood the stern-faced older man Victor had noticed earlier, Eleanor's father. He wasn't part of the celebration but was watching his daughter with an unreadable expression. Victor waited patiently until the crowd began to thin. As Eleanor turned to leave, he approached her. Ms. Chen, Eleanor, could I speak with you for a moment? She looked tired but nodded, following him to a quieter corner. I owe you an apology, Victor began. I was arrogant and disrespectful. I never should have put you on the spot like that. Eleanor studied him, her eyes thoughtful. Why did you? The directness of the question caught him off guard. I guess I'm used to being the best pianist in the room. When you said you just enjoyed playing sometimes, it felt like you were dismissing something I've dedicated my life to. But that wasn't it at all, was it? No, she said softly. Music has never been casual for me. But it's been complicated. Victor hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind. Why did you stop, really? You could have been playing in concert halls around the world. A shadow passed over Eleanor's face. She glanced toward her father, who was now speaking with Diane by the exit. Family needed me, she said simply. Some choices are made for us. But to give up a gift like yours, I never gave it up. Eleanor interrupted, a sudden fierceness in her voice. I still play. I still teach. Music isn't about applause, Mr. Harrington. It's about the connection. I have that every day, even if no one's watching. Victor felt humbled by her words. How many times had he performed without feeling truly connected to the music? How often had he measured his success by the audience's reaction, rather than by the truth of what he was expressing? You're right, he admitted. I think somewhere along the way I forgot that. Eleanor's expression softened. It happens. The business side of art can do that. Would you? Victor hesitated, uncertain if he was overstepping. Would you consider playing again? Professionally, I mean. It's not too late. Eleanor's gaze drifted back to her father. Some doors are harder to reopen than others. Before Victor could respond, they were interrupted by Grace, Eleanor's sister, who rushed over with excitement. Elle, you were amazing. Just like old times. She hugged Eleanor tightly, then turned to Victor with a knowing look. Well, what did you think of our little bookstore owner now? I think, Victor said slowly, that I've just heard one of the finest pianists of our generation, and that I have a lot to learn from her. Grace raised her eyebrows, impressed by his humility. Well, that's not what I expected from the great Victor Harrington. Grace, Eleanor chided gently. It's okay, Victor said. I deserve that. The three of them were joined by Martha, who linked her arm through Victor's. Eleanor, dear, that was truly magnificent. We're also grateful you agreed to play tonight. Thank you. Mrs. Harrington, I wonder, Martha continued, with the casual air that Victor recognized as his mother's planning voice, if you might consider playing at the summer festival next month? The committee would be thrilled. Eleanor began to shake her head, but before she could decline, a stern voice interrupted. Eleanor, it's time to go. Her father stood nearby, coat already on, his expression disapproving. Victor felt Eleanor tense beside him. Yes, father. Just a moment. She turned back to Martha. Thank you for the invitation, but I don't think... Think about it, Martha pressed gently. No need to decide tonight. Eleanor nodded, though Victor could tell she had already decided. She gathered her small purse and turned to leave, then paused and extended her hand to Victor. Thank you for the challenge, Mr. Harrington. It was unexpectedly meaningful. Victor shook her hand, feeling a connection that went beyond their brief acquaintance. The pleasure was mine, Ms. Chen. Truly. As Eleanor left with her father and sister, Victor noticed the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she seemed to diminish in her father's presence. The contrast between the woman who had commanded the piano with such authority and the dutiful daughter walking 3 steps behind her father was striking. That man has kept her locked away for 15 years, Martha murmured, following Victor's gaze. Such a waste. Victor watched until Eleanor disappeared through the exit door. Maybe not for much longer. Martha looked at her son curiously. What are you thinking? A plan was already forming in Victor's mind. a way to make amends, to use his influence for something meaningful. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond his own career. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that talent like hers deserves to be shared with the world, and that I might be able to help make that happen." Martha smiled, patting his arm. "Now that sounds like my son." The hall had emptied, the evening's excitement fading into memory. But for Victor, something new was just beginning. The challenge that had started as an ego trip had turned into a humbling lesson, and possibly a chance for redemption. The next morning, Victor stood outside Chen's books, gathering his courage. Through the window, he could see Eleanor arranging a display of new releases, her movements precise and efficient. The same care she brought to her piano playing seemed to extend to every aspect of her life. He pushed open the door, setting the bell jingling. Eleanor looked up, surprise crossing her face when she saw him. "Mr. Harrington," she said, setting down the book in her hand. "I didn't expect to see you again before you left town. Please call me Victor." He approached the counter, suddenly feeling nervous in a way he never did before performances. "And I've decided to extend my stay for a few days." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "The great concert pianist has time in his schedule for our little town?" There was no bitterness in her tone, just mild amusement. Victor smiled sheepishly. "I called my manager this morning and rearranged some things." He glanced around the quiet bookstore. "Do you have a minute to talk?" Eleanor checked her watch. "Grace should be here soon to take over." "Can you wait about 10 minutes?" Victor nodded, wandering over to browse the shelves while Eleanor helped an elderly customer find a mystery novel. He found himself in the music section, small but thoughtfully curated, with books on theory, composer biographies, and sheet music. One book caught his eye, The Heart of Performance: Finding Your Authentic Musical Voice. He picked it up, flipping to a random page. Technical perfection without emotional truth is merely an exercise. Music must speak from the soul of the performer to touch the soul of the listener. Victor felt the words resonate with uncomfortable clarity. Wasn't that exactly what Eleanor had demonstrated last night? And what he had been missing in his own playing recently? "That's a good one," Eleanor said, appearing beside him. "I recommend it to my advanced students." "I think I need to read it myself," Victor admitted, adding it to a small stack of books he'd gathered. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly at his selections. Books on music education, childhood development, and community arts programs. "Doing some research?" she asked. "You could say that." Victor followed her to the counter as she rang up his purchases. "Is there somewhere we could talk? Maybe get coffee?" 10 minutes later, they were settled in a small cafe 2 doors down from the bookstore. Victor stirred his coffee nervously, trying to find the right words to begin. "I want to apologize again for how I behaved," he said finally. "Not just at the bar, but my whole attitude." Eleanor sipped her tea. "You already apologized last night." "That was just the beginning." Victor leaned forward, earnest now. "Eleanor, what I heard last night was extraordinary. The way you played Chopin, it wasn't just technically brilliant." "It wasn't true. I haven't heard playing like that in years." "Maybe ever." A faint blush colored Eleanor's cheeks, but she remained composed. "Thank you. I've been thinking about what you said, about music being about connection, not applause." Victor shook his head ruefully. "Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. The competitions, the reviews, the pressure to be perfect. It all became about proving something, not expressing something." Eleanor studied him with those thoughtful eyes. "It happens to many professionals. The business side takes over. But not to you," Victor pointed out. "Even after 15 years away from the stage, your playing has more heart than most concert pianists I know." "How did you keep that?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment, tracing the rim of her teacup with one finger. "When I teach the children at the community center, they don't care about perfect technique. They care if the music makes them feel something. It's purifying in a way. It reminds me why I fell in love with the piano in the first place." Victor nodded, understanding dawning, before it became about expectations and obligations. "Exactly." Eleanor took another sip of tea. "But I doubt you extended your stay just to discuss music philosophy with me." Victor smiled, appreciating her directness. "No, I didn't." He took a deep breath. "I have a proposition for you, a real one this time, not a challenge." He explained his idea, a special concert in a major city featuring both of them. Not a competition, but a collaboration. Eleanor would be introduced to some important people in the music world. People who could offer her opportunities if she wanted them. I have connections, Victor said. Record labels, concert promoters, music schools looking for master teachers. People who should hear you play. Eleanor was shaking her head before he finished. That's very kind, but I can't leave the bookstore. My father could manage without you for a weekend, Victor suggested gently. Or Grace could help. The point is, you deserve the chance to share your gift with more people. Not to become famous or win competitions, but because what you do touches people's hearts. I saw it last night. The whole audience did. Eleanor stared into her tea, conflict evident on her face. It's complicated. Because of your father? Victor asked carefully. She looked up, a hint of steel in her eyes. My father sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. When he got sick, it was my turn to sacrifice. That was the deal. But he's better now, isn't he? Has been for years? Eleanor's silence was answer enough. Have you ever asked him directly if you could play again? Professionally, I mean. It's not that simple, Eleanor said, but doubt had crept into her voice. Maybe it is, Victor suggested. Maybe you've both been caught in patterns neither of you knows how to break. Before Eleanor could respond, the cafe door opened, and Mr. Chen himself walked in. His stern face darkened when he saw them together. Eleanor, he said sharply, Grace said you were taking a break? It's been half an hour. Eleanor stood immediately, her posture changing subtly, becoming smaller, more deferential. Sorry, Father. I was just finishing up. Victor rose as well, extending his hand. Mr. Chen, I'm Victor Harrington. We weren't properly introduced last night. The older man ignored the outstretched hand. I know who you are. The one who humiliated my daughter on stage. Father, that's not... Eleanor began. Actually, sir, Victor interrupted calmly. Your daughter outplayed me completely. It was I who was humiliated, and rightfully so. Mr. Chen seemed taken aback by this response. He looked between Victor and Eleanor, suspicion in his eyes. What do you want with my daughter? The direct question deserved a direct answer. I want to give her the opportunity to share her extraordinary talent with people who would appreciate it. The opportunity she gave up to care for you and your wife. Mr. Chen's face flushed. You know nothing about our family. I know your daughter has a rare gift, Victor said. And I know she honors you with her devotion. But sir, have you heard her play recently? Really listened? The older man's expression flickered. Eleanor does not perform anymore. She has responsibilities. And she has fulfilled them admirably, Victor pressed. But surely you didn't raise a prodigy only to see her talent buried in a small-town bookstore. Eleanor touched Victor's arm, a warning. Victor, please. This isn't your concern. No, Eleanor, her father said unexpectedly. Let him speak. He fixed Victor with a penetrating gaze. What exactly are you proposing? Victor explained his idea for the collaborative concert, watching Mr. Chen's face carefully for reactions. When he finished, the older man was quiet for a long moment. And if she does this concert, what then? You think she will abandon her family, her business to tour the world? That would be entirely her choice, Victor said. But I think Eleanor is capable of both having a musical career and honoring her family obligations. Many musicians do. Mr. Chen turned to his daughter. Is this what you want, Eleanor? To perform again? The question hung in the air between them. Eleanor straightened her shoulders, meeting her father's eyes directly. Yes, she said simply. I never stopped wanting it. Something shifted in Mr. Chen's expression. A softening, a recognition. Your mother worried about this. Before she died, she made me promise not to hold you back forever. She said I was too strict, too afraid of losing you to music. Eleanor's eyes widened. You never told me that. Because I wasn't ready to let go. Mr. Chen sighed, suddenly looking older, more vulnerable. Perhaps I still am not. But your mother would be disappointed in me now. Victor watched this exchange with growing hope. When Mr. Chen finally turned back to him, there was a new resolve in the older man's face. One concert, he said firmly. We will see after that. The smile that bloomed on Eleanor's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. 6 months later, Victor stood in the wings of Carnegie Hall, watching Eleanor take her bow to thunderous applause. Their collaborative concert had been a triumph, with critics particularly effusive about the rediscovered prodigy, who played with such emotional depth. Not bad for a bookstore owner, Grace said beside him. grinning proudly at her sister. Not bad for anyone, Victor replied. Eleanor had been offered recording contracts, teaching positions at prestigious conservatories, and concert opportunities around the world. She had accepted some and declined others, finding her own balance between music and family. The bookstore now had a small performance space in the back, where Eleanor gave lessons and held monthly recitals for her students. Her father helped manage the business side, having discovered a talent for it that surprised everyone, including himself. As for Victor, his own playing had transformed. Working with Eleanor had reminded him of music's true purpose, not to impress, but to connect. Critics noted the change, writing about the new emotional authenticity in his performances. Eleanor spotted them watching and gestured for Victor to join her on stage for their final duet. As they sat together at the grand piano, she whispered, "Thank you for challenging me." Victor smiled. "Best mistake I ever made." Together they began to play, four hands moving in perfect harmony, no longer in competition but in collaboration. Two artists sharing the language they both loved, speaking truth through music. The challenge that began with arrogance had ended with growth, connection, and something neither of them had expected to find in a small-town piano duel, a new beginning.